It has been an eventful 24 hours, and 721-1290 is our number. This is Talkback. That's John King. Good morning, John.
Hey, good morning, Peter.
Wow. It has been there's been some major events. Of course, we had a double shooting that occurred last night, and the other big event that actually would have eclipsed everything else was the appearance by author John Krakauer at a, shall we say, an overflowing event at the DoubleTree. The venue way too small for the amount of people that showed up.
Yeah, one of our correspondents was there at 6:15 and still never made it into the auditorium.
Well, he did. He finally made it in. Yeah,
but he didn't get into the actual auditorium. He was in like outer courts. If you
really?
imagine like the Old Testament temple, he was a little bit further away.
Okay, so he wasn't able to get into the inner sanctum.
But one person was able to get very close to the front, and that's our guest today, Thomas Dove. If you've gone online and watched any of the videos event, if you couldn't be there, like most Missoulians, at the end, a gentleman gets up and starts asking questions. The Missoulian has some of the video, and I'm going to play it for you in a second so you can get a temper of what was going on there. But he got booed off the stage, and you really don't get to hear what he says or was trying to say because of the fact that John Krakauer walks over and takes the microphone away from him. Well, we have him as our guest today on Talkback, and he's going to go ahead and fill us in on exactly what he was trying to say. And Peter, were you able to find the?
No, I don't see it here. So,
well, first let's. I wanted to give Thomas a chance to talk, so you can get his name in here.
Yes. So, Mr. Dove, good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning. I'm quite fine. It has been an eventful 24 hours.
Yes, it is an absolute pleasure to have you on. I watched the video with interest last night after John sent it to me, and I noted that you were trying to ask Mr. Krakauer some questions, and then the crowd began to shout you down, and at which point Mr. Krakauer actually came over and took the microphone out of your hands.
Yes, he did. I thought it was rather fascinating. Well, to begin with, this entire event had been advertised both by Fact and Fiction and also by Doubleday, who's the publisher of Mr. Krakauer's book, and also by Mr. Krakauer himself, for example, in the Wall Street Journal last week, saying, quote, "I felt I needed to do something in Missoula to allow my critics to confront me," close quote. And he actually started last night by saying, quote, "I wanted to come here and answer questions." My problem was, as I discovered that the process was going to produce a series of cherry-picked questions reviewed by the dean of the School of Journalism at Montana and not providing actual input from critics of Krakauer's, including myself. And I should make it clear from the very beginning, my intent was not to attack Mr. Krakauer's political or personal or philosophical points of view. I agree with him that the rape of all forms, acquaintance rape included, is a serious offense, and that we do need to recognize shortcomings in law enforcement and community attitudes. But there are things that he did in association with this book and other books that I thought needed to be brought to the public's attention so they could fully evaluate what he was doing. So I had actually advised Dean Abramson beforehand that I intended to speak, and if you look at the tape, you'll see that Abramson actually handed me the mic. I didn't grab the mic.
Great. All right.
So you didn't steal anything. You were there with authority, basically.
Right. I have before this book was released, I wrote a 10-page letter which I sent to the publishers as well as other media sources, laying out concerns about the fact that Mr. Krakauer's work was shortcoming, very seriously suffering from the shortcoming of not having spoken to all the responsible parties in this case, and that I thought he was heading in the direction of what happened to the Rolling Stone article about the rape at the University of Virginia, which later was retracted and heavily criticized by the Columbia School of Journalism report because of the confirmation bias that the reporter had shown. And confirmation bias, in case your listeners are not familiar with the term, is when someone starts out to do an investigation having already made up their mind what the answer is. They have an axe to grind, and they go in and only look for evidence which supports their point of view going in, much less what the evidence actually shows once they dig in fairly on both sides of the question.
Now, during last night's session, you asked Mr. Krakauer about that, and I want to play the tape so that everyone can hear how it went down last night and get a feel for the room, because if you weren't there, you might not know what to expect. At a book reading, I've been to many of them.
Right, yeah.
They're usually, I mean, you might get some soft claps afterwards.
They're very sedate, usually, yeah. So
this wasn't a book reading.
Yeah. Let's get this. Here we go.
Resident of Missoula. I'm an attorney of 44 years experience, 30 as a prosecutor, none of it in Montana. I notice you pride yourself, as I saw on your website, of being a feminist.
You ask your question?
Yeah, just give me some background. People want to identify themselves. You said today, I am a journalist. My point of view in this book is balanced.
I said I have a point of view. The facts are balanced.
No, you said your point of view.
Well, then I stand corrected.
Secondly, last week in Salon, what are some of the challenges peculiar to reporting about rape? And your answer is, part of it, at least in my case for this story, is that I'm not unbiased. I went into it wanting to believe that what these victims said was true.
That's absolutely right.
Okay. Did you engage in confirmation bias, such as the Columbia School of Journalism?
I absolutely, yes. I was very conscious of that. That's why I didn't just trust victims' words. You think there's not corroboration? Is that what you're telling me?
No, I'm saying, did you engage in confirmation bias?
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. My question was, in the same article, Rolling Stone has a lot to answer for, the Salon interview. At page 8 of that, and also at page A8 of the Missoulian, you said, quote, I have all of these audio and written recordings of university investigations of police interrogations. I am not supposed to have this stuff, and I...
Rape is real!
You can find another way to excuse me. Okay, please answer me right now. I said I'm not supposed to have this stuff, and I can't say how I got it. Boo! Get out of here.
Okay. Okay.
You get a sense of what was going on. Now, in the video, I had to cut a little bit out of it because it was, you can't see anything, and on air it doesn't make much sense. But there's a space before the booing where Mr. Dove is trying to say something, and you certainly can't hear it on that video. I don't know what he was saying, so he'll maybe explain that after this next break. But one of the questions I have for you, Thomas, to think about over our commercial break that's coming up here in just a few seconds is, there were chants from the audience there saying, rape is real, rape is real. And in the Missoulian video, there's a man that's in the back near the camera, and he says, what's his point? And he's asking you, basically, what is he trying to say, basically? Is he trying to say that there shouldn't be an investigation of rape, or what? What is he exactly trying to say? Well, I want to give you the opportunity to tell us what you're trying to say right when we come back.
Thomas, hang on. We'll be right back. 721-1290 is our number. This is fascinating. What you didn't get a chance to hear last night, you'll hear it today. We'll be right back. Thank you so much for joining us on this Thursday edition of Talkback. 721-1290 is our number, 1-800-568-5309. Joining us on the telephone this morning, the gentleman who was, shall we say, I think very rudely interrupted when he was trying to question John Krakauer last evening at the Doubletree toward the end of the presentation. Thomas Dove lives here in Missoula. Now, Thomas, you were stating that one of the reasons you wanted to make your case, if you will, at this presentation is you had a certain fear, right? So can you tell us about it?
Well, yes. I mean, I'm a past prosecutor. I spent 30 years with the California Attorney General's office. And I am very familiar with the public outcry concerning sexual assaults. And I'm also very familiar with the damage done to actual victims of sexual assaults by stories such as the campus rape plague story at UVA and the Rolling Stone, which had to be retracted after being heavily criticized by the Columbia Graduate School of Journalism report concerning same as being biased and one-sided. I tried to warn Krakauer's publishers that they were about ready to release a similar disaster on the public, with the possible result being, again, that innocent victims, people who should have their cases properly handled and adjudicated, would be afraid to come forward because of the backlash about claims of false allegations of rape. So I came last night to try to point out that Mr. Krakauer's technical approach is wrong. And I was astounded that he admitted to confirmation bias, because basically his entire paper, his entire 300-plus page book falls apart when you recognize that all he was trying to do was sharpen his axe and gather information in support of his position going into his supposed investigation. The idea that the crowd, turned on me, claiming this was not an open forum. By the way, Doubleday Dictionary defines a forum as a public meeting for involving audience discussion, which is what, of course, Krakauer had asked for, which is why I showed up. When they're afraid to listen to questions about the technical aspects of the book, why is it so one-sided? And then to have this guy admit, as he did in an interview article with the Salon magazine just last week, that he was biased, that he came into this entire thing biased. I went into writing it to believing that what these victims said was true. That's terribly unfortunate because it's going to produce what it has produced, a one-sided, biased, incomplete work.
Now, Mr. Dove, real quick, in the exchange that you had with Mr. Krakauer, you get him to admit that, yes, he had confirmation bias. And then he comes back and he asks you a question, and basically, I'm paraphrasing here, but he says, but yes, I went in, I went to the court, I looked at everything, and don't you believe that there's evidence to support this claim, basically?
No, that's not what he said. He said, I corroborated my story. Okay. An investigative reporter, as you well know, sir, canons of ethics of investigative journalism require that you investigate a case by looking at both sides of it. And you listen to what person A says, and then person B says, no, that's not the case. You gather evidence to corroborate the positions of both sides. You do your very best to find out the complete picture so that you can truly present to the public, here's what is known about these claims. Here's people who say it happened, here's people who say it didn't happen, and allow them to judge based upon the weight of the evidence. It's very similar to a public media version of a trial presentation. He claimed that he corroborated his side of the story. Yes, he looked for evidence to support his side of a story that he went into looking for evidence to corroborate his side of the story. He admits he did not speak to anybody in the mayor's office, anybody at the university. He did not speak to the attorneys in question. He didn't speak to the prosecutor's office, the police department, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He said he didn't need to. And one of the reasons he said he didn't need to is because, quote, as he said, both in the Salon article and in the Missoulian on April 19th at page A8, and in an NPR interview that ran on April 19th, quote, I have all these audio recordings of university investigations and police interviews and documents. I'm not supposed to have this stuff, and I can't say how I got it, and it's so much more valuable, close quote, than the interviewing actual knowledgeable persons. Well, that's ludicrous. I mean, you're reading selectively, from parts of the story to support your determined result, and he's doing so with illegally obtained material. When I confronted with him, how did he obtain these? He refused to answer. He said, reporter shield law. I said, are these illegally in your possession? I'm not going to answer. That's what he was, when he took the mic away, that's what he was telling me. I'm not going to answer.
Wow.
No.
Okay. I asked, did you break the law, either state or federal, in either obtaining or using these documents, such as violations of the Montana Criminal Confidentiality Act? He says the reporter's defense law. He was very nervous there. That's when he walked away. Just walked away. This is off the microphone. I was trying to get him to speak so that people could hear, but he didn't want to talk about this because he's already admitted that he's biased. He's already admitted that he's in possession of illegally obtained materials, and that's not a really very good place to be.
So I want to know what your response is to the people that were chanting rape is real.
Of course rape is real. I helped, as I said, I was a prosecutor. I was involved in cases handling writs, appeals, and actually participated in rape trials back in the 70s. It is real. There's no question but that people are attacked, both by acquaintances and otherwise. It's a vicious crime. I agree that it's just barely short of murder in many instances. It does horrendous damage to the individuals and to our community. I have a wife, a daughter, and a granddaughter. I don't want to see rapists, roaming the streets. I certainly debate a lot of his statistics and his material that he relies upon because it's one-sided in great part. But that doesn't mean there's not a problem. But because it's a real problem, it needs real analysis, real factual discussion, and real offers of solution. Even the New York Times says that all he's writing is bromides. He has no real alternative. He says he doesn't like the trial process, the adversarial process. He thinks it gets in the way of truth and justice. Well, I'd like to know what would happen if he was charged with a felony. Does he want to give up his rights to a trial by jury?
Right.
Okay.
Now, Mr. Dove, this is Peter Christian. One of the things that I've learned in this entire long affair, 3-year affair since the Department of Justice came to town and the county attorney's office and all the back and forth is that the investigations into sexual assaults and rape cases are one of the most difficult to bring to trial to a successful conclusion. Now, is that correct or not?
Absolutely. No question about it.
Now his assertion was, let's be more aggressive if you're a prosecutor. Let's be more aggressive. Let's bring more cases to trial. So what if we lose? So what if we lose? At least the more we bring, the more pressure will be brought to bear on the justice system. Now, how did you feel about that when you heard that last night?
It's something that one has heard as a prosecutor many, many times. The men and women in Missoula County's attorney's office, overwhelmed by a variety of different needs, just like every prosecutor's office. I believe, from what I have read, what I've seen, and I'm not, friends with these people, et cetera, but from what I've been able to determine publicly, have done what they believed was right. Prosecutorial discretion is very valuable. We only have limited resources. They're doing a better job. I think in many ways, the controversy has improved how Missoula is handling these crimes. And even he says that Missoula is actually better than national averages, and this is probably one of the best places in the country now, if you are an individual, to be able to report a rape and have it prosecuted. Okay. So in that sense, it's self-fulfilling. I do want to get back to something that I tried to talk about last night. It was mischaracterized incredibly by several people, including Gwen Florio. There is an interview that Krakauer gave to Random House's publisher, and called Bold Type Interview with John Krakauer, conducted by Larry Weissman of Random House back in '97. And I've given Mr. King the website reference to it. And I picked this off the web back in March. It's no longer there at Random House. They've scrubbed it. It's still out there if you dig in Writers' Archives. You can still find the article, but it's amazing. The article's been scrubbed from the Random House site. Okay, maybe it's because it's an interview about how did he get started writing. He never studied writing, but he had a secret fantasy about being a writer. He had a writing mentor who told him, quote, it's a great racket. So he quit his carpentry job and, quote, I've been writing ever since. He then goes on and discusses about his motivation and his approach to writing. Quote, I knew that you couldn't make a living simply by writing about the outdoors, so I made an effort from the beginning of my freelance career to write about other subjects. Since I had been a carpenter, I felt I could BS my way. The whole word is actually spelled out. I felt I could BS my way writing about architecture for Architectural Digest. I've been a commercial fisherman, so I had queried Smithsonian about a commercial fishery, and they went for it. He then said he was very, very disappointed with the amount of money he made for the local publications, even national magazines. So, quote, I said, F the local stuff because I wanted to pay the rent. I didn't have any grandiose ambitions of being an artiste. I wanted to pay the effing bills. So I worked really hard. I realized that what I wrote for Rolling Stone had to be pretty different from Smithsonian, and I gave them whatever they wanted. I wanted to sell the article. It was useful as a writer to try out different voices, and it was also smart as a businessman, quote unquote.
All right, tell you what, Thomas, we're overdue for a break. Take a quick one. We'll be right back. Thomas Dove joining us. We have a Facebook comment.
We do.
We'll be right back. Hey, we're back on Talkback, and we're running very, very short of time. Thomas Dove, a local attorney here in town,
I'm not an attorney in my town.
I'm sorry. A retired attorney. There you go. And he was at the Krakauer event last night. So go ahead.
That's right. So on Facebook, Sue says, it was not a public forum where anyone could ask questions. I listened to what I could on the live MCAT feed, and then it went down. Same problem for John King, by the way.
And Peter Christian.
It seemed like it was a love fest for the author. Now, I wanted to reiterate, no, Mr. Dove, you didn't take the microphone away from anybody. It was actually handed to you by the dean. Is that right?
That's correct. And as far as it being a public forum, it was advertised as a public forum. He asked for questions from the audience. Quote, I felt I needed to do something in Missoula to allow my critics to confront me. And the very definition of forum, as provided to us by Doubleday, is a public meeting or lecture involving audience discussion. There was no audience discussion but for my questions, which I had informed the dean I was going to ask.
So there you have it, folks. Apparently it was open.
Yeah, I know.
If you make the work and the effort.
It's only open to cherry-picked questions.
So we only have a few minutes left with you, Mr. Dove.
30 seconds.
If you could just wrap up what you think the public should take away from the Krakauer meeting and your involvement in it.
That his book actually does disservice to a very, very serious crisis that we do face, a crisis that I believe that the local authorities are addressing in a far more efficient and beneficial manner than Krakauer is willing to admit, and that his work will do damage, actually, to successful prosecution of rape cases when falls apart, as it is going to fall apart because of his admitted confirmation bias in writing the book.
Mr. Dove, thank you so much for being with us. We deeply appreciate your time.
Thank you, sir.
Take care.